The bomb squad moved with expert precision, rolling in a mobile X-ray unit, while a robot arm carefully maneuvered around the suitcase. The entire baggage area had been evacuated now, except for essential personnel. Rachel stood back, gripping Max's leash firmly, her mind racing. She watched the screen as blurry shapes emerged. The technician adjusted the resolution. One of the forms twitched. "There," he said, pointing at the screen. "That's not a device. That's organic, and it's moving." Rachel's breath caught. She leaned in. "Is it an animal?" "Possibly." But the man trailed off, then looked at her strangely. "The heat signature. It's small, very small." They didn't waste time. The robotic arm retracted, and 2 agents in protective gear stepped forward with cutters. The zipper was sealed shut with industrial tape. That alone was suspicious. Who tapes a suitcase shut? Rachel kept Max close as the team sliced through the tape and carefully peeled back the zipper. The atmosphere was tense. Even seasoned officers stood in silence. When they lifted the flap, one of the agents gasped audibly. "Call EMS. Now," he shouted. Rachel stepped forward, heart pounding. Inside, cocooned in a thin blanket and wedged between towels, was a newborn baby. Her skin was pale, her lips tinged blue. She didn't cry, she didn't move, but she was breathing barely. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. She dropped to her knees beside the baby as medics rushed forward with oxygen and thermal wraps. Max didn't bark this time. He simply sat beside Rachel, his eyes locked on the tiny, fragile body in front of them. "How long has she been there?" someone asked. "Too long," came a medic's reply. "Body temp is critically low." Rachel's pulse thundered in her ears. She could hardly hear the rest of the conversation as paramedics carefully lifted the baby and placed her into an incubator-like unit. They wheeled her away toward the ambulance, leaving the suitcase lying open on the floor. There was no baby formula, no note, no ID, nothing. Just that one small life, left to the mercy of the airport. Florand Max's instincts. Rachel turned to him and stroked his head gently. "You did good, boy. You saved her." He nudged her hand with his nose. Calm now, as if he'd known all along. By the time the area was reopened, the suitcase had been collected as evidence, and the remaining crowd shuffled out with heavy expressions. News of what had happened began to ripple through the terminal, whispered from person to person. A baby was in the bag, and that dog found her. Rachel sat quietly in the hallway outside the security office, eyes closed, trying to process what just happened. An officer approached her with a clipboard. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, just not what I expected today." Max was incredible. If it weren't for him. Rachel didn't answer. Her mind was still in the moment, watching the baby's chest rise and fall. That weak flicker of life that could have vanished forever if Max hadn't acted when he did. One of the airport staff walked up holding a thermal mug. "You want coffee? You look like you've seen a ghost." She declined politely. Her thoughts were elsewhere, on the suitcase, the child, and the kind of person who'd leave a baby like that, not even abandoned in a stroller or basket, but zipped, taped, hidden. Rachel glanced down at Max. He looked back up at her, his eyes warm and intelligent. "There's a story behind this," she said quietly, "and I'm going to find out what it is." She didn't know it yet, but the suitcase wasn't just it was the key to a much darker truth waiting to be uncovered. Rachel stood outside the hospital room, watching through the glass as doctors and nurses worked quickly to stabilize the infant. The baby lay inside a clear incubator, tiny limbs tucked under the thin blanket that barely covered her. Tubes and sensors surrounded her fragile body, beeping monitors tracking each flicker of life. "She was minutes from dying," said the attending nurse. "Hypothermia, oxygen deprivation. Whoever left her, they didn't expect her to survive." Rachel's fists clenched at her sides, but she did because Max knew. The nurse gave her a tired smile. "That dog deserves a medal." Back at the airport, chaos buzzed behind the scenes. The suitcase had been taken into evidence, and airport security was reviewing hours of surveillance footage. No one had come forward. No reports of a missing child. No security alerts triggered. Just a silent bag on Carousel 9 and a dog that wouldn't walk past it. Inside the security office, Rachel leaned over a technician's shoulder as he rewound the footage. "There," she said. "Pause it." The screen froze on a woman. She wore a grey hoodie with the hood up and oversized sunglasses. Her face was turned slightly from the camera. She held the suitcase loosely in one hand, her other hand tucked in her pocket. She moved slowly, nervously. She walked straight to the carousel, doesn't even glance around, Rachel said, then drops the bag and walks out like she's catching a flight. The tech nodded. No ID tags, no boarding pass scan, nothing. She's not on any manifest. They followed her backward through the footage. She had entered through the public arrivals entrance, no luggage in tow until she appeared near the curb. A cab had dropped her off, but when they zoomed in on the plates, nothing. Stolen, another officer said. Fake registration. Everything about her was deliberate. The anonymity, the escape, the clean drop. Rachel stepped back and rubbed her temple. She didn't want to be seen. She wanted the baby to be found, but not by just anyone. Someone pushed open the office door. "We found something in the suitcase lining." Rachel turned quickly. An officer handed her a clear evidence bag. Inside was a small, torn piece of paper, yellowed and creased, like it had been written quickly, maybe in fear. Scrawled in a shaky hand were just a few words. "Forgive me. I had no choice. If you find her, ... protect her." Rachel read it twice. The words trembled on the page, as if still breathing with the emotion behind them. She felt something, deep in her chest, stir. Whoever had left the child didn't do it out of cruelty. There was desperation behind that note, maybe even love. She wanted her daughter to live, Rachel said aloud, and she trusted a stranger to make it happen. Someone added. Rachel looked down at Max, who was lying quietly under the desk. He looked up at her, then back at the note. She didn't trust a stranger, Rachel murmured. She trusted the world to give her daughter a chance, and somehow, Max became that chance. By late afternoon, the media had already picked up the story. News vans lined the airport entrance. Hero K9 uncovers abandoned baby in luggage. The headline screamed, but Rachel wasn't thinking about the press. Her mind was stuck on the woman in the footage and why she was so scared she believed this was her only option. Back at the hospital. The baby had improved slightly. Doctors said she was a fighter. Still no ID, no birth records. She had no name, until one of the nurses said softly, "Let's call her Hope, until we know who she is." The name stuck. Rachel sat by Hope's incubator as the hospital lights dimmed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the torn note again, staring at the shaky writing. There were still so many questions. Who was the woman? Why the suitcase? What danger had she been fleeing from? Rachel didn't know the answers. Not yet. But something told her this wasn't just about an abandoned baby. It was about something much, much bigger. And Maxie had only just scratched the surface. 3 days had passed since the baby girl Hope had been found in the suitcase. Her condition had stabilized, and the nurses said she was stronger than anyone expected. She was still in the NICU, still without a birth certificate, a mother, or even a full name. But she was alive. Rachel couldn't stay away. Every spare hour she had, she returned to the hospital. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the note. Maybe it was the look in Max's eyes that day. Or maybe it was the nagging feeling that the story hadn't even begun yet. While Max rested in the K9 unit's kennel, Rachel sat in the evidence room that morning, going over the suitcase again. The case itself was ordinary, worn around the wheels and corners, the kind a traveler might own for years. But something didn't sit right. She unzipped the inner lining again and began going over every crease and fold. Tucked into a seam under the bottom panel, barely noticeable, she found a thin plastic pouch nearly flat. Inside it were 3 things: a folded hospital wristband, a second, smaller piece of a torn note, and a photo. Rachel opened the photo first. It was faded, taken indoors. A young woman with light brown skin and tired eyes held a newborn in a hospital blanket. Her arms looked shaky but protective. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't crying either. Just exhausted and determined. Rachel stared at the wristband. It read, Dawson, Leela, baby girl Dawson, 12:07 a.m. The date was recent, less than a week before Hope had been found. She grabbed the torn paper next. The handwriting matched the first note. This one was shakier, smudged. "I tried to keep her safe. I begged them. They said they'd come for her. I couldn't let it happen." Rachel froze. Begged who? Come for her? Who was they? She quickly copied the information from the wristband and logged into a federal database. Leila Dawson, she typed, followed by the hospital name. A hit came up almost instantly, but not what she expected. Leila Dawson had been reported missing. She was 22 years old. last seen at a women's shelter in Philadelphia. Her case file was marked flagged, potential victim of trafficking. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't abandonment. This wasn't neglect. This was escape. She called the local police department in Philadelphia and asked for the lead investigator on the Dawson case. After some hold time and paperwork, she got through to Detective Alan Hirsch. "You found the baby?" he asked. Sounding stunned, Rachel explained everything. Max, the suitcase, the photo, the wristbands, the notes. "We had reports she was pregnant," Hirsch said, lowering his voice. "We thought she'd been taken again before the baby was born. She was scheduled for a meeting with an advocacy group, but she never showed up, just disappeared." Rachel swallowed hard. Then this baby. She was running to protect her. "More like hiding her," he said. "We know Layla was targeted by a trafficking ring that operated through shelters. They control victims with threats, debt, isolation. We've been trying to take them down for over a year." Rachel sat back in her chair. That suitcase. It was never about getting rid of her baby. It was about giving her a chance. Hirsch sighed on the other end. "And now we've got a reason to reopen the case. You gave us a lead." Rachel ended the call, heart racing. The full truth began to form like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting. Leila had escaped just long enough to give birth and hide her baby in the one place she hoped someone honest would find her. An international airport, where every bag was watched, where anyone might notice. And somehow, fate gave her Max. Rachel picked up her phone and called her supervisor. "I want to be part of the investigation," she said. "I think we're looking at something bigger than one missing woman." He hesitated. "Rachel, this sounds like it's out of our jurisdiction." "I don't care. I need to see this through." After a pause, he agreed, and just like that, Rachel and Max weren't just customs officers anymore. They were about to walk straight into the heart of a network darker than either of them had imagined. Armed with nothing but a dog's instincts and a mother's last hope, the Philadelphia police agreed to let Rachel assist unofficially. Wasn't a detective, but her connection to the case and the dog that uncovered it made her impossible to leave out. Detective Hirsch called it a moral partnership. Rachel didn't care what it was called. She just wanted answers. She brought Max with her to the city. The dog, ever calm and sharp, seemed to understand the urgency behind this new assignment. At times, Rachel swore he could sense the weight of what they were walking into. The first stop was the women's shelter where Leila Dawson had stayed, a narrow building tucked between an auto shop and an abandoned laundromat. The sign out front was faded, the steps cracked, but inside, the staff was kind and scared. The manager, a woman in her late 40s named Carla, spoke quietly once she understood who Rachel was. "I remember Leila, sweet girl, scared of her own shadow. She never gave us the full story, but we could tell she was hiding from someone." Rachel nodded. "Did she ever mention being followed, or someone looking for her?" Carla hesitated. "Once she came back one night, crying, said someone in a black SUV had waited outside the shelter all day. She asked to change rooms. The next morning, she was gone." Rachel showed Carla the photo they'd found in the suitcase. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "That's her, and that baby. It's hers. God, she must have been so desperate." "She was more than desperate," Rachel said. "She was trying to save her child from something worse than being abandoned." Carla looked over her shoulder. "They came here once. 2 men claimed to be family, but Leila told us they weren't. Said if we ever believed them, they'd take her away, and she'd never be seen again. Now I'm starting to think she was right." Back at the precinct, Detective Hirsch laid out a map. Red pins dotted the locations of shelters and hospitals where trafficking victims had disappeared without explanation. Layla was just one of many, he explained. The ring uses fake identities, unmarked vehicles, and forged documents to move women between states. They focus on those without families, green cards, or paper trails. No one notices when they vanish. Rachel stared at the pins. "You think she was supposed to hand over the baby?" "We think the baby was the reason she tried to escape." The theory was chilling. Layla had likely been allowed to carry her child, watched closely, until someone decided it was time to take the infant into the system. But Leila didn't comply. She ran. Rachel leaned down and patted Max's head. She made it as far as the airport, and he found her before it was too late. Hirsch slid over a manila folder. "We just got a tip. One of our informants saw a woman matching Leila's description leaving a bus station 2 nights ago alone, barefoot and bleeding. Rachel stood immediately, where a rundown area near Glen Park, abandoned row houses. There's a place there we've been watching. Possible safe house. You up for a field check? I'm bringing Max. They geared up and drove out. Under cover of darkness, the streets grew quieter, trash bins overflowing, windows boarded up. The address led them to a grey house with a caved-in porch. Lights were off, curtains torn. Rachel stepped out with Max, letting the leash out slightly. Go slow, boy. Let's see what you find. Max's nose twitched. He sniffed the ground, walked along the fence, then suddenly stopped. He barked once. Low, urgent. Rachel signaled Hirsch. They advanced cautiously, weapons drawn. The front door was cracked open. Inside, it smelled of mildew and rusted metal. Mattresses on the floor, food wrappers, and in the corner bloody towels. Rachel moved toward them when Max suddenly growled at a locked closet door. Hirsch forced it open. Inside, huddled and shaking, was a woman. Her hair was matted, her feet were blistered. But when she lifted her face into the light, Rachel recognized her immediately. It was Leela Dawson. Leela flinched at the light, her eyes bloodshot and dazed. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. She was holding herself in a protective curl, as if even breathing too loudly might get her hurt. Rachel lowered her voice and knelt down. Leela, it's okay. You're safe now. My name's Rachel. I'm the officer who found your baby. Leela blinked, slowly processing the words. Her lips parted, and she whispered something Rachel could barely hear. Hope, is she alive? Rachel nodded. Gently, yes. She's alive. She's strong. She's at the hospital, getting better every day. You did it. You saved her. At that, Leela broke down. Silent sobs rocked her body as she buried her face into her hands. Rachel didn't touch her, she knew better, but Max walked forward, sat just inches away, and laid down, eyes soft. Leila looked at him through her fingers and whispered, You found her, didn't you? Rachel smiled softly. He wouldn't walk past your suitcase, wouldn't let me ignore it. They brought Leila out on a stretcher, wrapped her in a thermal blanket, and got her to the nearest hospital. She was malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from infections, some old, some recent, but she was alive. Against all odds, she had made it. Later that evening, Rachel sat beside her hospital bed. Leela was hooked to IVs, but her mind was clearer now. Detective Hirsch joined them as Rachel gently asked, Can you tell us what happened? What made you leave the baby like that? Leela hesitated. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. They told me she belonged to them. Rachel froze. Who did? Leila stared out the window. The men I ran from, they weren't just traffickers. They were buyers. Wealthy people who paid to own girls. Me, and now her. Hirsch leaned forward. You're saying they wanted your baby for the same system? Leela nodded slowly. I heard them talking. After I gave birth, one of them came to the hospital in disguise, said he had rights to her, that I owed him. I took her and ran. Rachel felt her stomach twist. This wasn't just a trafficking ring. It was deeper, organized, silent, ruthless. Leila continued. I used fake names, hid in shelters, changed cities. I knew they'd catch me eventually. So I went where there were cameras, where someone might find her before they did. I had no plan, just faith. Rachel sat back, absorbing the truth. You didn't abandon her. You protected her. I had nothing else to give, Leela whispered, her voice cracking. No family, no ID, not even diapers. I taped that suitcase shut and prayed someone kind would find her before it was too late. They all sat in silence for a moment. Hirsch was already texting updates to his team. Then Rachel remembered something. She reached into her folder and pulled out the photo. This was in the suitcase. You kept it with her. Leela smiled for the first time, a faint, painful thing. I took that myself. On the hospital mirror. I wanted her to know she was loved, even if I wasn't there. Rachel's throat tightened. The emotion in the room was heavy, but something inside her felt clearer than ever. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. This was personal. She stood and leaned gently toward Leela. I promise you, we're going to take them down. Not just for you, but for every girl they've hurt. Leela looked up. They'll come for her again, won't they? Rachel didn't lie. They might, but they'll have to go through all of us now. Later that night, Rachel drove back to the NICU. She stood by Hope's incubator, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. The baby's eyes fluttered open for a moment, locking onto her face before closing again. Max sat beside Rachel, his head resting on her shoe. She whispered to him, "We found her mum. And now, we start the fight." By morning, the task force had grown. Local and federal agents were now involved. Rachel and Detective Hirsch met with officials from Homeland Security, and suddenly, what began with an abandoned suitcase had become the epicenter of a national trafficking investigation. But no file, no agent, no law book could explain it the way Layla did. After her body had recovered just enough, Layla sat in a private hospital room, guarded around the clock. Rachel sat across from her, a notepad in hand, Max lying beside her chair like a quiet sentinel. "You ready to tell us everything?" Rachel asked gently. Layla nodded. "They started grooming me when I was 17. I was homeless, alone, and thought I found a boyfriend. He was 28, bought me food, gave me shelter. I thought he loved me." Rachel didn't interrupt. She just listened. This wasn't a testimony. It was a scar being torn open. "He introduced me to his friends. They said they had jobs for me, cleaning houses, modeling, waitressing. Then the abuse started. When I resisted, they took my ID, beat me, isolated me." Her voice trembled. "They moved me across cities. New names, new clothes. I was a ghost in my own body. But last year, I got away for a few days. A woman at a clinic gave me a burner. Phone. I ran to a shelter. That's when I found out I was pregnant." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Did the ring know you were having a baby?" "They did. That's when they became more interested. They said she'd be more valuable because she was born into the system. They treated her like a product. I couldn't let that happen." Leela paused, then looked Rachel straight in the eyes. "I planned for months. I saved money in scraps. I changed shelters, but they still found me after she was born. They had someone in the hospital, someone paid to watch." Rachel leaned in. "Do you remember the name?" Leela shook her head. "He used a fake badge, said he was from Child Services, but he had no paperwork. When he left the room, I ran the details a line too well. Hirsch had been following breadcrumbs for months, but this was confirmation." Rachel flipped open her notepad and showed Lila a photo of a man captured on airport cameras the day Hope was found. Tall, clean-cut, wearing a visitor badge. "That him?" Leela stared at the image, her lips parting slightly. "That's him," Rachel exhaled, his badge scanned as a maintenance worker. "Name's fake. We think he was there looking for you." Layla sank back against the pillow, her hands trembling. "They knew I'd leave her somewhere. They were trying to get to her before someone like you did." Rachel stood. "They failed. Because of you." She left the hospital more determined than ever. She and Hirsch met that afternoon with Homeland Security agents. The man in the photo was placed on the most wanted list. Security footage was being cross-referenced nationwide. And then, an unexpected lead came in. A woman from a small midtown clinic called in, saying she recognized Leela's face on the news. She claimed she'd seen her months ago and that Layla wasn't alone. She came in with another girl, younger, maybe 16. Both looked terrified. Rachel and Hirsch arrived within the hour. The clinic's records confirmed it. Leela had visited with a girl named Amber, no last name. Amber had signs of physical trauma. She was never seen again after that visit. Back at the hospital, Rachel gently asked Leela about the girl. Leela's voice cracked. "Amber was like a little sister. We escaped together. I helped her hide, but they got her. I think they took her back." Rachel's chest tightened. This wasn't over. If Amber was still out there trapped, afraid, maybe even being moved again, time was running out. Rachel turned to Max as he looked up at her with calm focus. "We saved one," she said quietly. "Now let's go find the others." The team knew they had one shot. Rachel stood in the back of the operations van, staring at the layout on the digital board. It showed a rundown warehouse outside of Camden, New Jersey, just across the river. Detective Hirsch had received a call from an informant who claimed Amber was being held there, along with 2 other girls. The place was listed as an import-export business. No real paperwork, no website, no open hours. Rachel glanced over at Max, sitting calmly in the corner, already wearing his tactical vest. "You ready?" she whispered. He blinked slowly, like he always did before. Something big. Agents from Homeland Security, Philadelphia PD, and the FBI were stationed around the perimeter of the warehouse. The plan was a multi-angle approach, one team at the front, to distract, another breaching from the side. Rachel and Max would enter through a basement tunnel and old delivery route. Hirsch had uncovered in city blueprints. As dusk settled, the green light was given. Rachel, moving silently with Max by her side, slipped down the overgrown slope and found the hidden hatch entrance. It creaked as she opened it, revealing a damp, narrow staircase leading to the basement. The air was musty. Pipes hissed overhead. Max sniffed the ground and paused. He growled low, then moved forward with quiet certainty. Rachel followed. They reached a rusted metal door. Muffled voices leaked through. Rachel pressed her ear against it. Laughter, then a sharp, muffled cry. Young, scared. Amber. Rachel didn't hesitate. She signaled to Max, then kicked the door open with a force she didn't know she had. Chaos. 3 men inside. One was at a desk, flipping through forged documents. Another stood near a folding katamba, sat on it, duct tape on her wrists. Third man was mid-step, shocked by the sudden burst of noise and movement. FBI, don't move. Max lunged without command, knocking the desk man off his feet. Rachel raised her weapon and shouted again. The man near Amber dove for a weapon, but before he could reach it, backup officers surged in from behind. Within seconds, all 3 suspects were down, cuffed, and furious. Rachel rushed to Amber, quickly, cutting the tape from her wrists. The girl was pale and shaking. You're safe now, Rachel said gently. We've got you. Amber collapsed into her arms and cried silently. The warehouse was filled with more than just stolen girls. In the back room, they found boxes of blank birth certificates, immigration papers, baby formula, hospital gowns, and even adoption forms, some filled out, some stamped with forged seals. A full pipeline, a system that took women like Leela and sold their babies, like Hope, to the highest bidder. Rachel walked through the room slowly, rage growing in her chest. She had trained for weapons, narcotics, fraud, but nothing ever prepared her for this. Back outside, with the suspects loaded into black vans and Amber wrapped in a thermal blanket, Rachel leaned against the vehicle door and exhaled. Hirsch walked up beside her. You did it. No, she said, glancing at Max, who was sitting quietly with his tongue out, tail wagging. We did. 2 days later, the press conference was short but powerful. The trafficking ring had operated across 5 states. 12 girls were rescued. 6 arrests made. Authorities had enough evidence to tie the suspects to dozens of unsolved disappearances. But the highlight came when Layla, fragile but brave, walked to the podium with her baby in her arms. She wasn't hiding anymore. She looked directly at the cameras and said, They tried to take everything from me, but I'm still here, and so is my daughter. Because someone I never met cared enough to notice. Max was awarded a medal for exceptional service, though he didn't seem to care. He just nudged Rachel's hand and looked up at her, like he always did, waiting for the next thing, the next scent, the next moment that might change her life. Rachel smiled down at him. The suitcase had been forgotten by everyone in that airport, everyone except one dog, and now, the truth had been found hidden in silence, locked in fear but finally free. 2 weeks later, the world had changed for Leela Dawson. Her face had appeared on news outlets across the country, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a fighter, a mother who risked everything to save her child. And the story had gone viral. K9 finds baby in suitcase, uncovers hidden trafficking network. But behind the headlines, Leela's journey wasn't over. She sat in the warm glow of a recovery center, Hope asleep in her arms. For the first time, they were safe. No false names, no running, no suitcase. Just a mother and her daughter. Rachel stood nearby, watching through the window. She didn't want to intrude. Max sat beside her, his ears perked up, tails swishing softly along the floor. Go ahead, said the center's director. She's been asking for you. Rachel stepped inside. Leela looked up and smiled, truly smiled for the first time. She was wearing soft clothes, hair tied back, cheeks fuller, eyes brighter. Hope was curled peacefully on her chest, wearing a pink knit cap donated by one of the NICU nurses. She knows your voice, Layla said. When she hears it on the news, she looks toward the screen. Rachel laughed softly. Then she's already smarter than half the people I work with. Leela looked down at her daughter. They gave me options. New ID, relocation. I can disappear, start over. But this time, not out of fear. You'll take it, Rachel asked. Yes, for her, for both of us. But first, she paused, then gently reached toward Rachel. She needs a godmother, and there's no one I trust more. Rachel blinked, caught off guard. her voice caught in her throat. "I'd be honored." Max let out a soft huff, tail wagging, as if he knew. They sat in silence for a few moments, the kind that speaks louder than words. Then Layla asked, "What happens to the others?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Amber is in counseling. She has family looking for her. The task force is growing. More shelters are speaking out. And the leads we got from that warehouse, fake names, bank accounts, travel records, it's only the beginning. We're going after every last one of them." Layla held hope tighter. "Good. No girl should grow up in fear." Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees, a peaceful dusk. For once, not a warning but a promise. That night, Rachel walked Max through the airport where it all began. The carousel was quiet now, just a few late-night travelers retrieving bags. The same looping voice played overhead, the same cold floor, but everything felt different. She paused by Carousel 9. Max sniffed the air, then looked up at her. "You remember, don't you?" she whispered. He sat down, eyes steady, ears alert. Rachel reached into her pocket and pulled out a new collar. Tag. On it, engraved carefully, were the words, "Max, the dog who listened." She clipped it onto his collar, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Because that day," she said softly, "you didn't just smell something strange, you heard what no one else did. A cry that wasn't loud, a plea that wasn't spoken. You didn't just find a bag, you saved a life." A voice came over the airport intercom. "Attention passengers, please report all unattended items." Rachel smiled. Some things are worth noticing. As she and Max walked back through the terminal, she thought about how close it had all come to being ignored as Suitcase. Just another unclaimed item, a lost object in a busy world. But it wasn't an object. It was a child, a beginning, a fight that had yet to be fought. The headlines would fade, the medals would tarnish, but the lives touched by that moment would never forget. A dog who barked at the right time, a woman brave enough to run, a baby born into danger, but now wrapped in safety, and an officer who listened not just with her ears, but with her heart. Because sometimes the unthinkable hides in plain sight, and sometimes hope does too.